Hello there, and welcome to 3Spoonies. We're your hosts, Karen, Jo and Claire. This is episode number 61, and we're discussing sensory seeking and overload. Join us as we dive in.
If money advice has ever made someone feel lazy, chaotic, or like they've somehow failed at adulthood, Maddie Alexander Grout wants people to know they are definitely not alone. Maddie is a visibility coach for hidden disability entrepreneurs, ADHD advocate, speaker and best-selling author, and she wrote Mad About Money because she was tired of seeing neurodivergent people judged for struggling with money. This isn't a finance book full of complicated jargon and unrealistic routines. It's honest, relatable, and designed for people whose brains don't work in neat little spreadsheets. Inside, Maddie talks openly about ADHD, impulse spending, debt, overwhelm, burnout, dopamine chasing, and creating systems that work in real life, not just on paper. The book combines practical money support with personal stories, humour and reassurance for anyone who has ever felt bad with money. Mad About Money is available now.
And I'm Claire from Black Bar Stationery.
Hello, I'm Karen from Pony Pony Pony.
And I'm Jo from Bright Cat Business Solutions.
And together we're 3Spoonies navigating our way through life and business with not enough spoons and currently not enough dental treatment. So today we are going to be talking about sensory stuff, which is the official technical term, I believe. We're joined by our lovely guest, Dr Joanna Grace. Hello, hello.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Would you like to tell our listeners, viewers, others a little bit about you and what you do?
Yes, so I'm Dr Jo Grace. I am a sensory engagement and inclusion and belonging specialist, and I explore the sensory world in a multitude of ways. My two main interests are people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. So for the last 2 decades, my work has focused on the people who they get classed in research as the most disabled members of our society, which is quite an accolade to get. But my work focuses on them, and they are people who often don't have access to standardized forms of communication, people for whom their experience of the world and meaning within it is sensory. And so in order to work with them, I need a deep knowledge of the senses. And then that sort of overlaps into my other interest. So I am an autistic person who has differences in the way that I perceive the world at a sensory level compared to if I might not be an autistic person. And that deep knowledge of the sensory systems applies to my life. I've got an autistic son, the life of my children, and I work with lots of families of autistic people and professionals who support autistic people to explore sensory experience in all the different ways. But it's quite a nice overlap because your listeners will probably appreciate that autistic people quite often have a thing that they're focused on. And I am living the autistic dream because you've invited me here to talk about the thing I'm focused on. And that's not often what happens for us. So thank you very much.
I think we can all very much relate to that. And yeah, it's something I think people maybe have some degree of understanding of, but I feel there's always more to learn and more that can be done, which is why we get experts in. So it's not just us three numpties talking nonsense all the time.
Yeah, I think so. With regards to understanding the sensory experience of neurodivergent people, we are seeing a better understanding as a kind of broader community. Like most people are aware that autistic people might not like a Dyson Air hand dryer, the noise in an environment or visual clutter. There was a washing advert or washing detergent advert recently that was basically saying, if you wash your clothes in this laundry detergent, they'll be soft enough for even an autistic person to wear, which is a bit, but I was really delighted to see it in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But did you buy it?
I can't remember which one it was. Sorry. We've got that understanding of auditory differences, maybe a bit with visual. We understand tactile differences, like not liking seams in your socks or things like that. But there's loads of hidden sensory differences that a lot of autistic people, neurodivergent people, people who have, it's not just autistic people who would process sensory information in a different way. You will know as a community that when you're in pain, your responses to sensation are different. To, like, you don't want to go to the party when you've got a headache. Anybody can understand that. So we all have these different thresholds that change depending on our circumstance. And some of those more hidden ones, I think, are really interesting to explore. But that could just be because I am really interested in that sort of thing.
I think that's true. I think sometimes you might also not know what an issue is. Like, you might not like a particular place. And is it the vibes? Is it the background sound? Is it the lighting? Is it a combination? Is it someone's perfume? Is it the fact that there's a takeaway been sat in the bin for 3 days? It's,
It's absolutely that. So I am a sensory engagement specialist, which just means I'm somebody who reads a lot about sensory stuff. It just means I'm a nerd in this field. It's not a qualification. It's not, I haven't, nobody's certified that. It's just it does what it says on the tin situation. And when I was diagnosed as autistic, so like many women of my generation, I wasn't identified until adulthood. So I was diagnosed when I was 36, and it's quite a long and extensive process that you go through, despite what the tabloids might make out. They don't just hand out the diagnoses willy-nilly. It's really a carefully thought through thing. And the final stage of that long process for me was to be interviewed by somebody, in-depth personal interviews about my life and my experience, for that person to judge a final diagnosis situation. And I have been working as a sensory engagement specialist prior to this, for a long while prior to this. And when I was diagnosed, people said to me, "Have you got any sensory differences, Jo?" And I say, No, I'm one of those unusual autistic people who just senses the world completely normally, because this is how I've always sensed things.
Apart from all these things that I've been told since.
How would you know that you're sensing any differently so how would you know what the difference was? But that process of diagnosis, the woman who diagnosed me, by the time you got to that stage where you were being interviewed by her, you probably were autistic. Her job is probably interviewing loads of autistic people ongoing. The room that she conducted that interview in was extraordinary to me. I remember walking in the first meeting I had with her and thinking, wow, it's nice in here. And I couldn't have told you straight off the bat why, but like, it was light, but there was no single source point. There was no like bright spot. It was like the room just glowed. And there wasn't any, the colours were, and you look around the room and there was no assumption of eye contact in any of the furniture. There were no chairs facing each other. The chair that was clearly mine to sit on had this sort of base and seat thing where you thought, oh, I'll be allowed to put my feet up on that. Like, that's a chair sitting on with your legs tucked up. And everything about that space was so easy to occupy as an autistic person. And she said, as I went in the room, she said, is everything okay in here? Do you need it lighter? Do you need it warmer? Do you need it colder? Is it fine? And I was looking around going, no, it's lovely. And she did a quick check and she said, oh, I'll just switch off that plug socket. And I had noticed the plug socket was on, but I can cope with a switched on plug socket. But that kind of detail of unfinished business in the room will, call out to me and it be something I'm attending to. And she switched it off and it's just like this entirely zen environment. You're like, this is amazing. It was the easiest conversation I've had in my life.
Well, you said again, can I stay here forever?
Yes. Well, this is the thing. If I'm ever sort of stressed or struggling to sleep at night, sometimes I'll imagine I'm back in that room, because until I had 2 hours in a space that wasn't demanding at a sensory level, I didn't know what it was to feel like that.
Yeah, that is true. Mine was done over Teams, which is the absolute opposite of that experience. But notably was when I was 42, which is the answer to the question of life, the universe, and everything. So who knew?
So what I'm saying is I've got another 2 years to wait. I mean, it might take me.
That's just how it is.
Till the neurodivergence fully fledges in your brain.
Yeah. No, just till I eventually fill the form in.
No, that's my personal litmus test for ADHD in women, is how long they've had.
I've got that one to do as well.
Oh, that's I think anybody who sends that form straight back, you can go, no, that's not an
Yeah.
ADHD person, unless somebody
It's
filled it in for
been
them.
sat there since August.
Yeah. No, I was doing a parent carers group, and there was a lot of mums who were likely neurodivergent themselves, and all the ones that thought they might be ADHD. I think the shortest amount of time anybody'd had that form was 7 months.
Even my mum keeps going, have you filled the form in yet? It's like, no, it's on my list.
No, because I've got a condition that makes it difficult to do things like that.
Like I had the
But have you chased this? Have you chased that? These are all in progress. Yes, I've chased those. Starting the next one, no.
Yeah, well, I had the ADHD assessment first, which is the horrible thing where you have to match the shapes and you need to focus on it for like at least 7 million years. It says it's 15 minutes or something. I'm like, that's lies. But they said that I was looking off all over the place and I obviously lost concentration, but also my head didn't move the whole time. And she said, honestly, I'd suspect autism just from that, if nothing else. Because it was like, must finish test, even though it causes pain. Anywho, that wasn't really relevant, but true.
Anyway, should we go with like back to basics? Can you give us a rough definition of sensory engagement and sensory overwhelm, other than doing the test of?
So I don't come at this from a sort of clinical pathologizing diagnostic type of thing. Sensory engagement to me is a very literal, you are engaged with, you are attentive to, you are connected with I'm quite often telling sensory stories. So with the sensory resource from the story that I'm sharing with you. And that's a very simple thing. So sensory stories are ACE. They are concise narratives. You get about 8 to 10 sentences to tell a sensory story. So it's like a form of haiku. It's this short form creative thing. And each sentence in a sensory story would be partnered with a really gorgeous sensory experience. And those sensory experiences in the stories that I create are monosensory as you encounter them, but multisensory across the story. So you'd have a sentence and you'd be touching something, and then you'd have a sentence and you'd be smelling something. And to get engagement in that situation from somebody with a profound disability who faces multiple barriers to accessing that little bit of shared communication, or from somebody who is processing the sensory world in a very different way that's leading to them being, like you described, Karen, doing that test. If you're being pulled out of your attention and jumped all around and you're agitated by your environment, it's difficult to get that engagement. So how you craft a situation where you get that engagement is partly to do with choosing a really lovely resource. So I look at things that draw the attention of a sensory system. And it has to just be the sensory system alone, because if your attention is coming from your curiosity, then I'm requiring you to have intellectual capacity in order to be engaged in what I'm offering you. And I want it to be an offer for everybody. So if I can get engagement just from your sensory system, then, and you understand it as well, then your understanding is a bonus. But I'm heading in at that sort of start out level. So it's partly about getting something that draws the attention of your sense or fills a whole sensory system. But I'd say it's about 25% that, and then the rest of it is backdrop. Because it doesn't matter how lovely the thing I'm offering you is, if there's a whole sort of set of fireworks going off in the background, you're not going to be able to engage with it. And the understanding of the sensory backdrops that we live amongst is one of those big overlaps between neurodivergent experience and the work that I do with people with complex disabilities, because things like visual clutter is a really good one. We've got that understanding that a lot of autistic people struggle with tactile sensations. They might struggle with noisy environments and be overstimulated by noisy environments, but visual clutter is not often spotted. So a lot of autistic people have hypervisual processing. Not all autistic people, because nothing is ever all autistic people, but a lot of autistic people have hypervisual processing, which means you're taking in and processing more information about the visual world around you. And a good analogy for it is the difference between old TVs and new TVs. So if you are as old as some of us, you'll remember when televisions were 3-dimensional objects. And when you watched them, you would see a little flicker go across the screen as you watch. And what was happening was the little mechanisms inside would check every pixel, every frame to see if it needed to be updated. So like on the screen now, most of the pixels on my screen are this teal blue, and the only ones that would need to be updated are where I'm wobbling my head and my earrings are swinging about. And those would be the ones that need to be updated. But in the old TVs, they checked every pixel, every frame. So it's a massive drain of energy. And the new screens that we're working on today just take a photo of the image, and then they know in their little digital brains which bits are moving and which bits are changing. And they only actually bother using energy on those bits. So they're much more energy efficient. And it's an almost perfect analogy, because if you have hypervisual processing, you're looking at every pixel, every frame. It takes a huge amount of energy. And if you don't, it's weird reading the research around non-autistic vision, how little people are actually seeing. Because in rooms that you're familiar with, you're quite often running off a photo that your brain took 2 or 3 days ago. It's why people can lose their keys and then find them on the table in plain sight. It's because you're not actually you think you're seeing stuff, but you're not. And your vision is a third of your cerebral cortex. So it's a huge chunk of your brain. And your brain, most of what I say, by the way, is based on research. Some of what I say is dubious. I'll flag up when it's dubious. This is dubious. This is probably information from a Woman's Own magazine in the 90s. Your brain burns something like 90% of the calories that you eat in your day. It'll like your brain is a huge amount of the energy that your body consumes in the day. That bit's fine, whether it's 90%.
It is. It's not 90%, but it is.
If we all just think really hard, we'll get thin. Isn't that what it's saying?
No, I've tried that for nearly 40 years. It don't work.
No, my physics teacher told me that if you think really hard for 2 hours, it uses up the calories in a peanut.
That's so disappointing. No, thank you.
That's just conscious thought, though. Like, is that different from the background processing? And
your brain is a lot of the processing, and a huge chunk of that is used by your seeing. And if you are then a hypervisual processor, you are doing even more visual work than somebody else. And if you are not somebody who has hypervisual processing, you've probably had an experience of being tired through seeing. If you've ever done one of those weekend breaks where you sort of look around a city or go around galleries and you sort of wander about the place going, ooh, and looking at architecture. And you get back to the hotel room at the end of one of those days and you sort of slump on the bed and go, gosh, we must have walked miles today. Knackered. Like, I bought a book with me. I was meaning to read the book, but I can't be asked. Just put the TV on, tell the children they can go on their iPads. And if you step counted it against a regular day, it's nothing. You've wandered about licking ice creams. You haven't power walked around the city. You're tired from all the new seeing. And when you're tired from all the new seeing, you haven't got the capacity for intellectual engagement. You don't want to read the book. You don't want to talk to your family. You just don't want to do anything. And that I quite often meet people who are struggling a lot, especially I meet families of children who are struggling a lot. I meet very frightened parents, and you get situations where people are expressing how much they're struggling through big behavior or through really frightening actions. And the families and the staff that support these people will say that nothing causes it. It just happens. He just suddenly does it, or she just suddenly does it, and we can't work out what's causing it. And in those situations, I love an analogy. It's when a straw breaks the camel's back, you don't go fishing around for which straw broke it. You ask what was loading the camel. And that processing of visual clutter in the environment can be a huge load of straw on a little autistic camel's back, because you're having to do all of that all the time, and it reduces your capacity in other areas. And then you can take that and plonk it across different sensory systems. And yeah.
Like my explanation of it's quite obvious if I'm having a bad pain day because I have no patience for anything.
Yes.
And I will get snappy and grumpy very quickly.
yeah, I think it's very hard. I know a lot of parents will say, oh, I must be a terrible parent because they're good as gold at school and they come home and they just melt down. And it's like, no. That means you're a good parent. That means everything in the day has been too much. And you're their safe space. That's not you doing things wrong, but it's so hard.
Yeah, I had a lovely, I was picking my little boy up from school, and you're standing in the playground, and I wasn't trying to listen, but the conversation is happening right next to me. And the parent told the teacher on the door, they said, every day when we walk around the corner from school, she just flips out and I have to drag her home and she's so upset. And I was listening thinking, that's the Coke bottle effect. I have heard this story lots of times before. And the teacher on the door said, thank you so much for telling us. That must mean she's under so much pressure here. We need to change what we're doing here. And you're like, my goodness. Because I've heard different versions of that story where it's like, you need to go on a parenting course and you need to be firmer with her. I meet some very qualified parents, my work, and all the parenting courses.
And nobody ever thought to go, no, the problem's not you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It means you're their safe space.
Insane. I know there's autistic shutdown and meltdown. I particularly do shutdown. Is that often triggered by sensory overwhelm and just sensory overwhelm, or is there like lots of different reasons?
There would be multiple reasons. As a sensory engagement specialist, I would be very prone for looking for the sensory ones because that's always where I go to. I think if you are looking at those big emotional responses, there is a particular sensory system that's really interesting to consider in relation to that. So I generally run to 7 sensory systems on the sensory projects when I'm writing sensory stories. So I do the famous 5 conscious senses that we all know and love, and then I do 2 subconscious senses. And the reason that I run to 7 is purely practical. In writing a sensory story, I get 8 to 10 sentences to tell a story. And over the course of that story, I want to offer stimulation to a theoretical all of the sensory systems. And I used to get into little Twitter chats with people who would go, do you know there's 11 sensory systems? Or do you know this? I'm like, I do. Technically, you've got 33 sets of neurons that control your senses. So arguably there's 33 sensory systems. But then when you're arguing stuff like that, you are just looking at neuronal groupings. So it's like trying to argue how many constellations there are in the night sky. We do generally agree, like different cultures and communities have blobbed them all the same. We're like, that's Orion, that's Pan, but you can separate Orion from his belt and the Pan from its handle and say there's even more. So it's always a debatable thing. But certainly we have a lot of subconscious senses that, like our conscious senses, are critical to our accessing and engaging with the world and understanding the information within it. And my original reason for choosing 7 is just because it's practical. If I've only got 10 sentences, I can definitely get 7 within 10. 11 isn't going to work, is it? I can't. But once you start dealing in subconscious senses, it's like gateway drugs and you end up sliding into more. So I am more commonly up to 9 now. And if you want to do full nerd mode, you can do some of the more like odd ones. And there's different.
Tell us what they are.
Oh, I can't name you all 33, not without going.
I know, like the 11.
Paper, but like there's little weird ones, like there's a particular set of neurons that are entirely dedicated to the space just around your hand. It's like your hand and near your hand, like about yay far away from your hand. And you have a specific set of neurons in your brain that look at that space. And this is where I lose it. I can read the science to a fairly high level, and then after that it just sounds like magic to me. And this is where it goes over into magic, because at a single cell level, the neurons that are to do with that Peri-Hand space, it's called Peri-Hand space, are sight, touch, and sound neurons all at the same time. How does that work?
It is magic.
Oh, but it's so much fun. They do. This is not what you need to know. This is just nerdy
But it
stuff.
sounds interesting. I want to know. Science me.
The Peri-Hand space, because those neurons. So, like when you're teaching a little person to read, and you'd get them to point at the words on the page, such a good idea. Because when they're looking at the words on the page, they're using their sight neurons, look at them, and then you point and you put the words on the page within that Peri-Hand space, and now they've got another group of neurons because they're sight, touch, and sound neurons all at once, bringing them information at the same time. So you've increased the knowledge that their brain is getting about those little squiggles on the page. And so that pointing gives you increased access to knowledge in that area. And then they do magic things whereby if you hold something, so I'm holding a pen, that extends the reach of your Peri-Hand space neurons to the end of the pen. So like when you point at things on the board, yeah, stuff like that. It's great. It's also why, you know, when you see those little internet memes where the dad catches the cricket ball just before it smashes the baby in the face or something like that, that's why we have this extra perception in these areas, it's an old sort of survival. It's like it's really useful for us to have more knowledge about the space around our hands, because our hands can do stuff, the space around our head, and we have a set that's just a sort of general space around our body, so that our senses are about finding food and not becoming food, and that really helps with the latter. But your on
That's
top,
amazing.
it's good. Your on topic question was about mental health and shutdown and meltdown. So of those 33 sensory systems, 32 are about sensing the external world, and 1 is about sensing your internal world. And interoception, which is the one that looks at your internal world, is really key to how we access mental health support, because a lot of mental health support presumes interoceptive capacity, and not everybody has interoceptive capacity. Conscious senses, we're very good at knowing whether people have an impairment or not. If somebody, like, we can see some of us are wearing glasses and some of us are not, and we understand what that means. We are aware that people hear at different levels, but the subconscious senses, we're at the start point, we're not aware we have them, and then we're not aware of those differences in impairment and processing. So your interoception is the sensory system that it's odd. It's the one that feels your feelings. And so I need 2 words, because so your feelings are held in your body. When somebody says to you, how do you feel? And you say, I feel worried, I feel happy, it feels like you're reporting a direct thing, but your emotional state is held in your body. So if you're feeling stressed, your shoulders are tense, your heart is beating fast, you're frowning, your muscles are tense. And I say, how are you feeling? Your interoception kind of looks at your body, notices the tense shoulders, the fast beating heart, and says, you seem to be feeling stressed. And then you can report back that you're feeling stressed. And if you don't have that good readout, you can have the feelings, but not know you have the feelings. And then the analogy that's good there is, it's like driving a car without a working fuel gauge. If you've got a working fuel gauge, you'll top up and you won't ever run out of petrol. If you haven't got a good readout, you might get to a crisis point, shutdown, meltdown, without being able to make the adjustments that you could have made if you'd known that you were heading that way. And this isn't something that I just speak about from a work point of view. This is something that I live in a really practical way. So I have pretty duff interoception. I'm not generally aware of how I'm feeling. So as well as it feeling your feelings, it feels all the things like whether you're hot or cold, whether you need to go to the toilet or not. So I didn't used to tell people I was autistic in a work situation. And then my son became the UK's youngest published author when he was 5, with his book, My Mummy is Autistic, which is written in all felt tip pen, colourful drawings. And I became the UK's most obnoxiously proud mummy. So I have to go around saying, I'm the mummy. And then that helps me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But he threatens to write another book all the time. And his sequel would be, My Mummy Never Wears a Coat in the Rain. Because I don't have a readout of whether I'm hot or cold. So why would you put a coat on? It's just like a clod-hopping thing that you have to carry around. It's just a faff. And it has no practical use to me, because I can't feel if I'm hot or cold. I don't know if I need a wee or not. It's a TMI situation, but I wet myself for far longer than a lady should. I am continent now, we'll all be pleased to know, but only because I do just in case wees, not because I know whether I need to wee or not. Sometimes I sit there watching the TV in the evening and I think I need a wee. And then I just watch another episode, and it sort of occurs to you in the ad break, like, I think I need a wee. And you get up to go to the bed and brush your teeth and go for a wee because you happen to be in the bathroom, not because you've gone to the toilet because you need a wee. You go for a wee because you happen to be there. And you're like, bloody hell, I needed a wee. Lucky I was close. But that sort of thing, that's just silly. The year before I met my husband, I work nationally and internationally sometimes. So I'm mostly on trains going to places to deliver training. The year before I met my husband, I had 11 emergency admissions to accident and emergency centres around the UK. Yeah, you come out of them with very serious drugs and people look at you very scared. And I got used to it. So I didn't look as scared as the medical people look, because I'm like, oh, I know that this is how. If you don't recognise that you're getting stressed, your body will tell you. And my body was telling me in a really big way, because I don't know. I have got no readout on that. I met my husband, and when he moved in with me, he tells me if I'm stressed or not, which is a sort of counterintuitive. Normally you would ask somebody how they feel,
No,
not
I can
tell
see how
somebody
you
how
feel.
they feel. And he'll just sort of remark on it. He'll say, "Oh, you seem a bit stressed today." And be like, "I'm fine." Because I'm fine as far as I'm concerned. And then he'll sort of mention it the next day. And when he's been going on about it for a couple of days in a row, he's like, "Why is he just on about that?" I'll check, and I have an external marker. So, like if you didn't have a working fuel gauge, you'd have to create some way of checking. You'd have to do a dipstick, or you'd have to count the miles. My external marker for how stressed I am is how many lists I have around me. In the vicinity currently, there's just one. But over there's at least another 5. I'm sort of mid-level. So when he's been sort of going, "Oh, you seem a bit stressed," I'll check my lists. And if there's too many lists, then I'll go, "Okay, yeah, I need to pull back." And since living with him, I have had no admissions to emergency departments
Yay!
because somebody else is doing the fuel gauge. And if you've got that readout, you've got a better capacity to understand what you need to change, to understand what's causing the stress. And if you don't, and you're getting super stressed, and then somebody's going, "Well, tell me why you got stressed and tell me how you feel," you're kind of stuck. It's like asking a blind person to tell me what color it was. If you haven't got that readout, it's very, yeah. If people are curious, my YouTube channel has a free playlist that are just little 2-minute videos on that interplay between interoception and mental health, because it's one of the ones where if you're trying to support neurodivergent mental health, it's a really useful one to think about.
That's really interesting and much sciencey. I love it.
Much science.
Which is why CBT shouldn't be the only thing that CAMS offers to young people. Just putting it out there.
The research that's been done into mental health has mostly been done to non-neurodivergent people. Autistic people are not a minority population. They've been actively removed from studies, not maliciously, but just because, if you're doing a sleep study to find out if mindfulness helps people sleep better, you need 50 people to do a little mindfulness practice and go to sleep. You spot that 3 of them are autistic. You think that might throw your findings. So they are removed. And autistic people have been removed from mental health research for decades. So we have really improved understanding of how to support neurotypical mental health. Our understanding of how to support neurodivergent mental health is emergent over the past, what I would say, like the last 5 years, maybe. I've been seeing papers being, so we're sort of
Is that
where
from
we
thousands
used to
of,
be in the 90s for us.
yeah, is that from thousands of people going, "CBT shit, I hate it"?
It's not safe for autistic people,
Explains
because
a lot.
it's assuming the assumption underpinning CBT is that you have bad patterns of thought, that you're thinking in a way that's unhelpful. And we all know people do that. Everybody's had the friend who gets a dubious boyfriend and then they go, "All men are terrible," and, "Oh, I'm never going to trust a man again." Like, that's not a useful way of thinking. And if you've got yourself into an unhelpful thought pattern, then a little bit of CBT will get you out of it. Excellent. But being neurodivergent is not a thought pattern. It's a neurotype. It's a biological reality in the body, and you can't think yourself out of that any more than you can think yourself out of your eye color. CBT not relevant. Mindfulness also pretty tricky.
Shit. Sorry, I've tried both. I hated them.
No,
They don't work, oddly enough.
mindfulness, the research into mindfulness it's a really interesting one, because like when I was at school, so I was a school kid in the 90s, mental health wasn't a thing. We sort of vaguely knew you should talk about it, and that's as far as it came. Back then, mindfulness was just something hippies did at festivals, along with aligning their chakras and stuff like that. Now it's cold hard science. Oxford University have a department that study mindfulness. Elizabeth Blackburn's team won the Nobel Prize for their research that shows mindfulness slows telomere decay. It's established as an answer to anxiety. And we are living through an age of anxiety. So the population has mood swings like people do. Nearly a quarter of the UK population report feeling anxious all the time. So it makes sense that you have this increased research interest into something that is demonstrably an answer to anxiety for non-autistic people. It's only safe for people who don't hold trauma. And
Yes.
the autistic people are a highly traumatized population. What you're asked to do when you be mindful is to pay non-judgmental attention to your present. And that is only safe if your present is safe. And if you hold trauma, then your present also contains all your past trauma. And the invitation to be mindful is an invitation to reoccupy trauma. It's not safe for a lot of autistic people.
Well,
Yeah.
I saw a lovely thing actually that said people need to Maslow before they can bloom, which for those of you who didn't do education theory, it's like you can't ask people to engage with things and consider things and to come up with ideas if they don't have their basic needs met. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel unsafe, you don't have the headspace to do any of that higher level thinking. And it's like, yeah.
There's also
No, you go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
you're good.
I was just going to say, it also concerns me that you're not allowed to say that mindfulness might not work for anyone. It's like, how dare you? Like the knee-jerk response some people have. And it's like, well, maybe this well-meaning little old lady doing her colouring session in church hall isn't prepared for someone having flashbacks and a meltdown and whatever else. And they just want to help. Don't get me wrong. It's not their fault,
Yeah.
but they're not a mental health professional. What do they do when it goes wrong?
No, there was a really big craze of it a few years ago, and because I do a lot of education conferences, and so you'd go and you'd be like the keynote at an education conference, and then after lunch somebody would go, right, just to get us all back in the room, just to, we're all just going to do a little 2 minutes of mindfulness before we carry on, and then somebody gets up and leads it, and you have to close your eyes and do this thing, and I would sit there, and it would make me feel incredibly stressed. And you open your eyes and you look around at the rest of the room, and they look like they're feeling really refreshed. And it's just one of those slap in the face moments where you're like, oh, this is really different for me, isn't it? Because if everybody else was feeling this the way I'm feeling it, there'd be a mutiny here, but you're all fine with this.
When I
It's
first
one of the common misunderstandings.
corporate, we did a mindfulness workshop, and
Yeah.
I got increasingly angry as it went on for no reason. Did
It was
not
just,
like.
you were just being irrational.
Yeah, clearly.
It's one of the common misunderstandings is autistic people get described as very anxious. And we do live with very high levels of anxiety, but that is not the same as having the mental health condition anxiety that mindfulness would be a good therapeutic response for. So I don't have stuff against mindfulness. It's needs to be used in the right situation. It's not at all for everybody. If you have the mental health condition anxiety, that is to do with worrying about possible futures or worrying that you won't be able to do, you're catastrophizing an imagined future. And mindfulness is like, no, just you're here and it's okay now, and that's fine. If you are autistic and you live with high levels of anxiety, you might be catastrophizing possible futures and have the mental health condition anxiety as well. Doesn't protect you from that. But more than likely, your baseline anxiety is caused by a mismatch between you and the sensory environment that you're occupying, because the environments that we occupy are built on the presumption of a neurotype that not everybody owns.
Total sense.
So that seems like a nice natural break to have time for some spoonsful of loveliness. So here's some lovely things for our sponsors to give you time to have a non-judgmental breathe in whichever form works for you.
Hi, I'm Liz Drury, and you probably recognise my voice, as I'm the voiceover artist behind the 3Spoonies podcast adverts. If you're curious about the other services I offer, pop over to my website, lizdrury.com, where you can find out how I could help you with things like voiceover for videos, narration for online courses, announcements for events, voicemail greetings and on-hold messages, audio tours for museums, and more. That's lizdrury.com.
Where I used to work, there used to be a big poster that says, if you're having a panic attack, focused on your breathing. My breathing's really fast. Oh no, now I'm panicking even more. My heart rate's really fast. I must be dying. Who made that poster?
The one at the meetings, they said, count your heartbeats. And you're like, how? And you look around the room and people are, and you're like, what? Can you all feel your heartbeat? It's like, what sort of weirdness is this?
Yes, sometimes it's all I can feel because my nervous system is screaming at me.
I can't feel my heartbeat at all.
I can't. So if someone says to me, like, feel your pulse on your neck or your wrist, I can never find it.
I could probably do that, but like just sit there and know.
I can't do any of that. I'm like, nope.
Yeah, it's all heart palpitations.
I'd only be aware if it's wrong. Like if something was very off, I'd suddenly notice. But yeah,
when the feeling gets really big.
Yeah. You see, I notice it because my nervous system's screaming at me. That's usually why. Okay, so Is there a general good sensory environment, or does it differ between people a lot?
I love the question. Yes and no. So everybody can have different sensory preferences, different things that they find triggering at a sensory level. These things would be based on your experience. You know, you can imagine if somebody's had a nasty time in hospital and they were playing George Michael whilst, you know, they're going to have a reaction to George Michael, things like that. So I would always encourage people to do that sensory detective work around the individual and to do that profiling of themselves. So, because we tend to only pay attention to sensory experience to the point of identification. So you're like, hear a noise outside, you think, oh, what's that noise? And once you know what the noise is, you go, oh, it's a car, and you stop paying attention. But actually, if you pay attention beyond the point of identification, then you can go, it's a car, and like, actually, I don't mind the kind of drone of traffic. That's quite an okay noise to me. Or it's the light and it's a bit buzzy. You know, just noticing a bit more can help you understand your own sensory profile, especially noticing if there are places you encounter that feel safe or feel calming. That's really useful information. So always individual, but so when I'm looking for really great sensory experiences to work with people with profound cognitive impairment, I'm looking at stuff that draws the attention of a sense or fills a whole sensory system. So an example there would be something like looking through coloured cellophane. Everything you see changes. The whole of your vision is changed, but it's just a little simple resource. Those are my first two. And then I get interested in the development of the senses. So I have, if people want more information on this, my book, Sensory Being for Sensory Beings, is about this, and the Super Sensory Lexicon course that I run. I normally run it once a year on my birthday because it's my favourite thing to do. This year I'm running it twice because it turns 10 this year. So celebrating double figures, I'm doing it twice. But your sensory systems are partly an innate capacity dictated by how you were born or what's happened to you, you know, if you've had an accident or something like that.
Trauma!
Yeah, that's it. It's partly the general understanding of it is to do with the sense organs. So if I've got eyes that work, I can see. My eyes might not work quite right, and I need glasses, or you know, I bumped my eye and now it's not working. But it's only about 25% receptor organ. 75% is the brain making sense of the information that that organ brings it, and that part where the brain is making sense of the information is a learned skill. And so I have a friend whose eyes work perfectly, but she's blind because her brain doesn't understand the information. And in typical development, we run through that learning what our sensory information means in the first few weeks of life. The only time we really spot it in the sort of general community is when we give babies black and white picture books. Because we're not saying this baby can't see, we're just saying this baby will find this easier to see. When you're just born and you're getting all this visual information from the world, it is easier to make sense of this is black and this is white than this is peach and this is duck egg blue or something like that. And
I
so
still can't do that.
no, that's it. Some of us get quite advanced in our visual processing. Others are
Yeah, my
not.
husband.
Can you do it? All the
Yeah, he
different,
can do it.
like an artist or something like that. But there is a curriculum to the senses in the same way that there's a curriculum to mathematics. So there is stuff that it is like the sensory equivalent of counting, and there's stuff that's the sensory equivalent of algebra. And my friend whose eyes work but can't see, for her, the visual world that she's occupying every day is the sensory equivalent of algebra. And if I wanted to teach you algebra, and I did do maths at university, so you watch it because I could give it a go. I wouldn't start you off with algebra. I'd start you off with experiences of one and many, and then we do counting, and then we do adding, and you know, I step you all the way through. And if I can step you through, you're more likely to be able to get to a situation where you can do algebra. But for all of us, the information that our brains can process first is the easiest for our brains to process. It's the least stressful. You know, if I jumped out at somebody on the street and asked them to do a standard deviation, you would see a look of panic in their eyes as they went, oh, I did that at GCSE once. But if you jump out at the street and ask somebody to count to 10, they can count to 10 before they've even asked you why you're being so weird and jumping out and asking maths questions. It's not a bulletin like, yeah, fine, 1, 2, 3, 4. So why? Why did you want me to do that? And people like count to put themselves to sleep at night, because it's an easy thing for the brain to do. And so if I was going broad brush, which you should never do, but if you just want like a best bet situation, stuff from the early development of the senses is generally easiest for us to process, calming, connective. That's the nice stuff. It's still not a universal, because it is the stuff that is processed most easily by the brain. It's like it's the stuff that comes through loudest. So if you are somebody who's bothered by it, it might be that it's the stuff that bothers you more.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's one of those things that when you're trying to figure out why is somebody being agitated or what's going on, having a kind of layout of where this is on the development of a sensory system is really useful. And then the other one to go for a universal is, and there are no universals, but if we were going for them, our sensory systems are partly informed by our life experiences, by the things that we've been exposed to, by the particular formation of our own body, but they are also partly informed by our evolution as a species. We have been wired for particular environments, and we have been living in these concrete boxes for the blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. Our senses at a base level recognize home as nature. And I think it was telling when in lockdown and people were allowed out for an hour, they went to nature. There's something in us that tells us, I feel safer here, I am at home here. Those sorts of, if I was doing, decorating someone's room, natural tones, like hoogie design, that sort of thing is a good bet.
Yeah. Oh, speaking on evolution, because I do love some science. Obviously, yeah, we've lived in these boxes for a blink of an eye. And sort of the clutter and everything we do with it can be harder for neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
Just safe space. Do we find that it's harder for neurotypical people and it has an effect there? Is that why, particularly the work environment, that has like upped everybody's anxiety because it's not how we're built to live? Is that something that's found?
Is that something that's found? I think it's a really good question.
Sorry,
There's a phrase.
I'm science nerd.
No. There's a lovely phrase, if you want geeky words. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which means the development of the species in the womb mimics the development of the evolution of the species. So
That is true, yeah.
Isn't it gorgeous? You start off as single cell organism. There's a bit of time in the womb when you have gills. We are.
And an egg sac.
Yeah. We are our own individual life, but we are also a creature that is built of the evolution of our whole species.
I love that.
And we are living in very, very different environments from where we've lived all along, with a lot more stimulation. And I've had a lot of questions lately from people who have been, so I occupy the online space in a way that's fairly common for neurodivergence. You'll find me on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. I used to be on Twitter, but it went very evil, so I tried to learn Instagram instead. And I'm too old for Instagram, so I don't really know what I'm doing there. But I'm
Me
learning.
neither, but it seems to be working.
It's much nicer than Twitter.
Mostly.
So, and I've been in these spaces since the dawn of time. So I think I was one of the first people on Facebook and things like this. And so I have people that I'm connected to there who I've been connected to for 10 years, 15 years, possibly even 20 now. And just lately, a couple of people, it's like a handful of people who I know to be people who've worked in this field for a really long time, have been saying to me, I think people are more autistic now than they used to be. And they know that's not a thing. They're saying it to me as a sort of safe space situation. Like, are you finding that the autistic people are more autistic, Jo? And my instinct is to go, no, don't say that. That's a terrible thing to say. You can't say it. But I wonder if it has all got more stressful for neurodivergence, because the rise in tech and exposure to things and stimulatory stuff is really rocketing, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
it's 24/7. It doesn't stop, which when your brain doesn't stop is also not good.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lovely 42 one for Karen. There's research that shows that the brains of autistic children at rest produce 42% more information than the brains of non-autistic children at rest, which is, I loved that. That's why I remember the stat. It's like noisy.
That's correct.
Noisy
I
brains.
well believe that, yeah.
Yeah, obviously those children grow up to be noisy-brained adults as well.
If things are going wrong and you do feel that you're getting overwhelmed, what are some positive things people can do in the moment, or what could you advise other people to do in that moment if they're not aware?
That's a good question. I got distracted by science. Yours is
That's a
practical.
good question.
I mean, there's science in it. I mean, if you said
Yeah.
bang your head on the wall, probably not the best response. I'm sure science would say that.
I think so if you're beginning to feel overwhelmed, how can you adjust to, so that you don't feel overwhelmed? It's a lovely aim to have for people. But when you meet that sort of question in education, as I quite often do, or in care settings, the idea is that this person who is getting overwhelmed is going to do something in order to not get overwhelmed, which would be lovely. Wouldn't it be lovely if they could? And they would certainly want to, but you need to know, we're back round to the interoception thing, you need to know that you're getting overwhelmed. So I remember a guy I heard about, and he said, I knew I was angry because I hit him. And it was that way around. He hadn't felt angry and then hit him. He noticed him hitting the other chap like a little David Attenborough in his own life and gone, oh, I appear to be angry. I conclude that so the person doing it themselves is really massively difficult. But other people doing it around you, that can be really useful, but it takes deep knowledge of that individual to be able to do it successfully. So my husband, if he's worried about me, he'll go into a sort of panic state of clearing work surfaces, because if he can remove visual clutter from my environment, he can free up capacity in me so that I might be able to say, what's the matter? But with the clutter, I'm sort of, it's like you've fragmented your own brain and you can't, so he knows something's wrong, but he doesn't know what. But if he can pack enough stuff away from the kitchen and the dining room table, he might be able to find out what's the matter. So knowing things like that for somebody, if it's turning off the radio or putting them under a weighted blanket or whatever it might be, can be a good hack.
I think, yeah, you're right. It does very much depend on the situation and how much has led up to that. I used to find that sometimes confusing people, while generally unethical, if someone is very angry, sometimes confusing them would kind of break that. There's one place I worked where one young people was basically smashing the place up with, I'm not going to go into what led up to it, but everyone else was just like, yeah, we're just leaving her to it. And I wanted in and said, don't do that. It gives you cellulite. And she turned around and went, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's really bad for your circulation. And that sort of, she was
But yeah,
confused, but it took her out
different
the
train
moment.
of thought. Yeah, that's nice.
But,
Distraction.
I mean, that won't always work. And in some cases, someone's too far in. Like we had one place I worked, the fire alarms were so loud and were accompanied by flashing lights, and there was this fire drill, and everyone went out and ignored the fact that one of the students was under the table because it was so loud. He couldn't think, he couldn't process, and no one had thought to check. And, in that moment, we ended up grabbing some headphones from the IT suite just to get it enough that we could get him outside.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that moment it wouldn't have worked because it was
No,
just too much.
the thing you said about when somebody's too far gone, the comment about cellulite wouldn't work. That's one that comes up. I do a day that's exploring the impact of the senses on behavior, which does what it says on the tin. And one of the things that we look at on that day is that if you are triggered at a sensory level, your access to capacities that you might otherwise have had, like language and reason and memory, is really limited. Because essentially, if you're being triggered at a sensory level, you're triggering a fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop, all the other F's response. And your senses, like I said earlier, are primarily about finding food and not becoming food. Some of them are more about one than the other. Does the milk smell off to you?
Always.
Finding food thing. Where is my body in space? Proprioception, very much am I becoming food sensory system. It's not. And if you are told at a sensory level that you're in danger, even if it's not accurate, because the fire alarm is to keep you safe. it's not. But if something tells you at a sensory level, if something triggers you and says, I'm about to become food, your brain does its very best survival function to get through that situation. And the ordering, when we say fight or flight, it's not incidental, it's fight first for all people, not just because you're neurodivergent or learning disabled or, process differently. We all go for violence first, because if there's a monster that's going to kill us and we can kill it, we've solved the problem. And if we can't kill it and we run away, then we've
It's
got
not
a problem
going.
to deal with another day. So you get these. I remember when I first started working at a special school, I have I don't know if people will be able to see me, but I have a face that just naturally looks quite innocent. Like, I've never managed to pull off edgy. I could have all the angular hairstyle I like and I still look like a primary school teacher. And so if you imagine me in my early 20s, I look like the epitome of innocence. And I'm starting in this special school with a whole range of behaviors and things that we might encounter. And one of the more senior members of staff, I'm pretty sure she was trying to spook me. She would tell me stories at break time. She's like, they bite, you got to watch out for so-and-so because he bites. And when he bites to the bone. And you'd be like, oh my goodness. And she was right. When that young man bit, he did bite to the bone, because he wasn't biting somebody to see if he could hurt them or to get a reaction. He was biting because like you used to get people to bite down on bits of wood to
Yeah.
surgery. It's just a panic reaction. It's nothing personal at all. And it was amazing the level of violence that you could encounter without any malice, without any intention to hurt you at all. And you meet the parents and they say, he's a lovely little boy. And you go, I agree. He's a lovely little boy. He's not meaning to hurt us. We know he's not meaning to hurt us. It's just the situation is creating that response in him. Like when a mouse is in a trap and bites the hand that saves it. And if your senses tell you that you're becoming food, your brain instigates that shutdown in order to make sure you don't become food. And it takes away your access to memory, because you don't need to be thinking about the past. You need to be reacting right now to the present. So it just walls off memory. And so people, I remember I used to have a job inspecting schools that had been in special measures multiple times over. It's very exciting. It's like rubbernecking traffic accidents.
Southend, except the grammar schools and Catholic schools, just putting out there, but carry on,
It's
sorry.
amazing to me how badly wrong schools could go. I was very naive and I learned a lot. But they would say, I remember a teacher in one of those settings saying, the trouble with children like Luke is you can tell them until you're blue in the face, they never learn. And you're like, no, you're telling them when he literally can't access his memories. How would he be able to learn? He can't. He physically can't lay down memory in this state. You lose access to memory. You lose access to your language and reason. And then the upsetting one there is generally people lose access to their processing of language before they lose their capacity to output it. So I've seen any number of times in secondary schools, children continuing to yell at the teacher, but they're no longer really hearing what's being said to them. So they just get themselves into more and more trouble. And you lose access to emotional processing. And I used to work in a secondary school, and there was a child there who from time to time would get triggered by his environment. And people weren't understanding it at the time. Their understanding was he was fine. And then suddenly he would be spectacularly violent. And then after he had been spectacularly violent, he would be really blank-faced calm. There was no, oh, he started it, or it was because of this, or there was none of that. It was just total, tranquil, blank face. And the whisperings in the staff room was, he's a psycho. And like, no, what's happened is he's been triggered at a sensory level. He's lost access to emotional processing. So you're not seeing any emotion. It's not malice. It's just telling you what a heightened state his brain has got into. And so, yeah, if you're triggered at that level, your cellulite thing wouldn't work because you wouldn't process it in. You can't do all the, oh, you'll get a red card or you're not going to have your iPad, because that requires you to be able to think outside of the present point. And all you can do in those moments is respond with sensory communication, because it's the only stuff you still have access to. And so looking at those things like what is calming at a sensory level, what is connective at a sensory level, becomes a point for supporting people who are massively stressed.
Yeah, I remember doing breakaway training and it was all so negative. And it's like, can we have a bit of empathy there? So you've got a young person who's in crisis, and from their awareness, they're aware there are people next to them. Then people have grabbed them. Then they can't move. Under those circumstances, most people would struggle and kick. And
Yeah, that's an attack.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if it's saying calm down as well. Has anyone ever
Saying
been
calm
calmed
down's
down by
hilarious.
saying calm down?
Has that
No.
ever worked with anyone ever?
No,
That's
that's
it.
why,
Well,
you know,
that
we
is
don't
the 2 words to never use in any situation, whether you're neurodivergent or not.
it's one of those understandings that you get from bad television all the time. Police smash down doors and go, calm down. Yeah, like you say, it's such a strange thing to be saying to young people, especially, isn't it? Because you're not actually telling them to calm down. What you're telling them to do is to not do the thing they're doing. That's what you want, is don't do that thing you're doing. But instead of saying don't do that thing you're doing, you're saying to do this other thing. And this other thing is itself a form of not doing. So you're saying don't do that thing you're doing, do this not doing. It makes no sense at all. And you can only do that not doing if you understand what that not doing is, know how it feels like, and know how to get yourself to that state. So I used to do work with a laughter therapist so I'm a primary school teacher, which means that children can have fun, but only so much fun. Because when children have too much fun, it becomes dangerous. And I like to have the children under control. I'm very old school. We will all line up quietly and then we will go into assembly. And the laughter therapist lady can get the children to like a hysterical state of laughter. And it's terrifying to me as everybody must be in control of their faculties, because she's got them absolutely silly fits of giggles laughing. And she gets them to that really heightened state. And then she teaches them how to get from that heightened state to a state of feeling calm. And then when they're feeling calm, she teaches them how to notice that they are feeling calm. She gets them to spot what their individual markers of feeling calm is. And then she takes them back up to heightened. And it's like this, oh, it's so frightening for me as a teacher. I can see the worth of it. She does this, and it's like an exercise. She's teaching them how to move between those states, how to recognize those states. And that hysterical kind of laughter is a highly agitated, heightened state. Okay, it's a positive one, but it's fairly similar in its kind of resonance to a highly agitated, aggro state, and the movement that you need to get back. But yeah, to just go calm down, it's really
Yeah, well,
to
that's, at the point I did that training, sort of teaching theory was very much find the biggest, most aggressive, preferably male teacher you can to deal with it. Whereas youth work theory was saying, no, opposite response, that's just going to ramp it up,
Yeah. Yeah, modelling might is right, aren't you, if you just get the big scary one to do it.
Yeah, so I'd often sort of go in because everyone would be like, oh, I don't want to hurt you. But I did once end up with a bin on my head because of that. So, although they both stopped at that point and went, oh my goodness, oh, you've got a bin on your head. I'm like, yeah, how did that happen?
What's the game? Like Mousetrap or Hungry Hippos? It's like that.
Yes.
It's sort of this whole calm down thing. It reminds me of stuff like I saw in the 90s, which was stop crying or I'll give you something to cry for. So that's not going to work.
Stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Yeah.
But yeah, no, does not work. Anyway, I am conscious of the time, and we could talk about this for hours.
I really can.
If anybody would like another episode on sensory stuff, emotional stuff, neuro development type stuff, we will happily do that. Let us know in the comments. But Karen, would you wrap us up?
Yes. So thank you so much for all of your input. Is there anything in particular you'd like to tell us about or plug? There's a few things you've sort of mentioned. Is there some useful resources? Any of the above?
So it's probably most useful if I tell people about free stuff. So my YouTube channel has lots of free little video clips and playlists about topics that are similar to what we've discussed. And if you go to my website, www.thesensoryprojects, it's got an S on the end, .co.uk, you can find links to my social media. My Facebook photo albums are resource banks. My LinkedIn has got lots of articles that I've written that you can read for free. And all my books and conferences and training and the sort of stuff you can buy is there as well. Thanks very much.
Marvellousness. So thank you very much once again. And thank you to all our lovely listeners, viewers, and combinations of the two. So thank you for joining us for 3Spoonies on sensory engagement, which is what I should have said at the beginning, but didn't, and Overwhelm. We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for our weekly podcast. You can also leave us a lovely review or even a middling review. You do you, it's okay. You can also buy us coffee if you like what we do, or a bubble tea. Either will work. Links, as ever, will be in the show notes, so do give those resources a look. We'll see you next week for community questions. Have a great day and keep track of your spoons.